You're all very welcome to this timely webinar on how we handle the drought scenario that we have here at the minute. You're all very well aware of what's happening out there. It's very variable through the region of Waterford, Kilkenny. Some people got rain in the last number of weeks and other areas haven't. So there's different levels of feeding going on. So we hope to touch on that during the next 40 minutes. So the main topics for this evening are the feeding, what feeding is happening now, what are we going to feed, and looking at silage stocks for next winter, how are we eating into them and what we can do to supplement for silage. And the other side of this is fertilizer. In the next fertilizer has to be spread by the 15th of September, and we'll just look at what kind of fertilizer we're recommending at the minute. We have a very good panel here. We have Pat Moylan, Teagasc Kilkenny here, will be joined by Tommy Costigan, a good Fenian man from Johnstown in Kilkenny, and they will talk through the situation on the farm there out in Johnstown. Michael Fitzgerald, Teagasc Kilkenny, will talk about, the fertilizer recommendations, and Sandra Hayes, Teagasc, coordinator of the joint program, will talk about, measuring the pits, how we measure the pits, and what the tools we can use that'll help us to measure the pits. We're also joined by Owen Power here, who will take questions. And the questions here are very important this evening. Any questions you have, can you put them into the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen? There's a Q&A section. So if you put questions in there, we will deal with those at the end. So just to get kicked off straight away, I suppose the other side of this is, we're measuring everything, measuring grass, measuring silage, and having a plan. At the end of the day is we need to have a plan. So with that in mind, I'm going to ask Pat and Tommy to kick us off.
Okay, good evening. This is Pat Moylan here from Teagasc Kilkenny. So at the outset, I want to thank our guest farmer speaker tonight, Tommy Costigan. Tommy's farm with his father, Willie, there up in Ballyspellin in Johnstown in County Kilkenny. So I suppose maybe, Tommy, you're online there. If you could just give us an outline maybe of the farm, the cow numbers, and the general farm system up there on the Spa Hill in North Kilkenny in Johnstown.
Yeah, so basically it's the Fodder and myself, we worked together. We're milking 240 cows, spring calving system, 240 cows on a 80-hectare platform. Very dry farm, very limestoney. It's on a hill terrain as well. So yeah.
Okay, so look, that's just by way of introduction. So he's farmed there on the Spa Hill. Most of you know they're from that massive big mass there over Johnstown. So obviously, Tommy, you're very prone to drought there over the year and the year. So I suppose, what drought number is this for you in 2022?
We lost count at this stage, so.
Okay, so look, we're going to look at Tommy and Willie's grass situation, look at their current cow diet. We're going to attempt to look at how we build up grass on the farm, and then Michael Fitzgerald later on will come back on the fertilizer strategy for the Costigan farm. So I suppose the first thing here is just to get Tommy maybe to bring us through. This is the current grass situation. Tommy, you're a prolific user of the Teagasc pasture base tool. So maybe I'll let you talk us through the grass wedge that you see there on your screen in front of us as of last Monday.
Yeah, so basically we walk the farm at home every single Monday just to get a picture of where we stand and then to make a plan for the next 6 days, etc. So kind of to summarize how the summer has been going, just looking back on our farm covers, the farm has been crashing basically every third week. So we might start off at a high cover and then eventually she'll start to fall, and next thing we might get a shower of rain or heavy dew, etc. And then she'll start to climb again. So at the moment, we had an average farm cover of 490 back on the 15th, and now at the moment it's sitting at 803. But growths that have declined from 60 last week down to 45, as you see on the wedge. So things are starting to stall again. So hopefully with the rain now coming this weekend, we'll be in a great position to build grass. Basically, what happened on 15th to the 8th, when we had an average farm cover of 490, we decided to go in heavy because obviously it was the 15th of August. And according to our stocking rate, obviously we would have to have a rough estimate of an average farm cover, maybe 1,000 close to it by the end of that month. So therefore, we had a large gap at that stage, and we were just lucky with the 2 inches of rainfall that fell on a Monday, and just kind of we had dew on a good few mornings. It just ticked growth along. So we just kept measuring, and we just kind of made a plan. We went in heavy with the nuts in the parlour, and we went in with silage along the boundaries of the fields, and we decided to get an extra grazing in the paddocks as well. So we tightened the cows up, and it has worked. So we're at it. This is our third week at it, and obviously, by looking at the wedge, it has worked. We have started to build covers, decent covers, so far. So yeah, that's where we are.
Very good. I suppose just to make the point at this stage, if you're looking at that grass wedge in the middle of the summer, it would look very healthy. Indeed, it might look a surplus situation. So I suppose just to make the point at this time of the year, the wedge and the wedge line there, the red line is not really significant. We're looking at the average farm cover for time of year. I suppose, Tommy, the other thing I see there is stocking rate is 2.9. So I think it's just the cows only now on the platform at the moment as we speak.
That's correct, yeah.
And were there other stock on the platform that you took out over the last 3 weeks to help build cover?
It has, yes. Yeah, the heifers, to be honest, we stalled our heifers in the paddock off the Blinken platform that had a bit of a concrete base. We kind of gave them bales of silage for probably 8 days in a trailer, and that helped alleviate things a little bit as well. And they're gone into a paddock that's off the Blinken platform now with a bit of grass. So.
Okay, excellent. So I suppose we have to think about stocking rate on the milking platform. That's your first calculation to do following the webinar. We're going to touch on the demand at 17 kilos of grass being removed per hectare per day by looking at, I suppose, the current cow diet there, Tommy. So just you can talk us through there, what you see there on the screen. That's your diet today.
Yeah, so just when the average farm cover hit 490, we were on kind of a 15% protein nut. We're feeding probably 3 to 4 kgs at that time. Decided to go in heavy with the nuts. So we went 6, maybe sometimes 7 or 8, depending on the cover that's in that paddock. And so it is quite heavy feed in the parlour, but the cows the majority of cows, I would say, seem to be eating it out quite well. There seems to be a little left over. The only real extra labour is maybe turning on the augers, maybe midway through the milking. With regards to silage, it's this year we decided to make a separate clamp in the silage pit of good surplus grass. So instead of bales, we pitted it in a separate corner in the silage pit. So it actually worked very well because it reduced all the labour, etc., with plastic and open bales. We have a diet feeder on farm, so it's quite easy to measure then tonnage wise what's going out to the cows. So we went along the boundaries of the fields and fed along there, and it has worked out very well. I would say, thanks to the hard ground, etc., there's been very little wastage.
Okay, so the diet that you're looking at there, it could be typical, or it could be what a lot of you should be, could be or are looking at. It's a third, as we said earlier. And I just put the whole lot there into the Chagas ration reckoner to give an idea of the analysis of the diet. So the first thing you see there is the UFL, the net energy, 0.96 UFL per kilo dry matter. So that's quite high energy. Anything above 0.94, 0.95 is what you'd like it to be at. And the overall crude protein, I think Michael Fitzgerald will touch this later on, is 14.7% in the diet. So we do know in dry times on some of the farms tonight, maybe on very withered or brown grass, that the crude protein of that grass can be low. And that's something you need to look at, that you may need extra additional crude protein in the diet. And there is a dispensation from your derogation requirement, which Michael Fitzgerald will elaborate on later on. And Tommy, I suppose people may be interested, how have the cows performed in that diet, or how are they currently performing today?
Yeah, so we're extremely happy with how the cows are performing. They're producing 24 litres at the moment and haven't dropped really below that, consistent for the last, say, 4 to 6 weeks. They have been given around 2 kg mixed solids per cow at the moment, which is very good, maybe 1.92, depending on where they're going grazing. But yeah, extremely happy how they're giving it. So yeah.
So yeah, I suppose once they settle on the diet, there's no issues because they knew how it's coming the next day.
Very, very, very content on their diet. Very content. They would go into the paddock, go at their grass, and then they'll go pick at the silage. And obviously, their water demands will be quite high because obviously concentrates are quite high in the parlour. But they are very content after 2 or 3 hours after milking.
Okay, very good. So just moving on then, I suppose just to put in a few photographs there from the Spa Hill. We're trying to sell Spa Hill as a tourist destination there, Tommy, as well. Overlooking many 4 or 5 counties, I think. So just explain to us what we see in the photographs there.
Yeah, so obviously this is a paddock they were grazing at night time. Roughly a cover 1,000, maybe a little bit more on it. So we again went very tight in that field. We got around 3 grazings in that field. We threw the silage along the boundaries, and the utilization has been excellent. Again, milk yield didn't drop. Cows were content. So yeah, and obviously the grass quality has been excellent. So yeah, very happy.
So a very simple idea. Other people are using round feeders in a specific paddock, leaving the parlour. I suppose the dangers, I suppose, be feeding in sheds. Is have you got enough feed space? Is there danger of mastitis, etc.? Cows lying down on cubicles after milking. So that's what I would say.
What I would say about obviously tightening the cows up in a particular field like that, we would have had our mastitis kind of cases would have creeped up a little bit on us. That's obviously because they're in a smaller space, obviously, and yeah, so it's I'd rather deal with that than the other way around.
Okay, so look, that's very simply a very good diagrammatic or good photographs there. So look, moving on there, I'm not going to a lot of figures here, and you've seen these before, folks, but these are our target autumn grass covers, and I suppose I have a question mark there for a reason. I suppose in Tommy's case here, he's stocked at close on 3 cows per hectare. So I suppose, look, we're going to talk next how the lads here might build up some bit of grass cover, but that would be the target there for mid to late September for most farms, an average farm cover of 1,100, which would mean that their best paddocks in 2 or 3 weeks' time might be a cover of 2,100 or more, which is 3 fistfuls high. So I suppose one way, if you're not measuring grass, is if you're not going into covers of 3 fistfuls high in 3 weeks' time, you will know that grass is not built up to a certain degree on your farm. And the other way you could look at it there is rotation. And so that table is available there, different stocking rates. And obviously you can see there that as you increase stocking rate, it will be harder and harder to build grass. So I suppose just moving on from that then, I suppose, look, I'm asking Tommy here, look, the stocking rate is currently at 2.9 cows in a hectare. Is there any scope to reduce it further, Tommy, or not?
There is, Pat, I would have to say, like, obviously our scanning is complete, so we know what's empty in the herd, and obviously milk recording, our folk milk recording will be done in 2 or 3 weeks' time, and I suppose any low yielders, first lactation, etc., would we have an option of obviously taking them out and try them off early.
Okay, so look, as I suppose the second point says there, reducing stocking rate, and particularly more so this year, it is a huge effect on increasing and building grass cover. You'll find the higher the stock rate in the platform at the back end, it just means you have a higher demand for grass, and you'll end up with a lot extra feeding, and more so this year. So I suppose, look, Tommy, your case, and we'll talk about them all. I suppose you're happy, you've had supplementary feeding. You recognise that you weren't on target 3-4 weeks ago, and you've been feeding as you described ever since.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
Okay. So look, I suppose the last few points there, I suppose that peak grass cover reach will determine the feeding for the rest of the year. While I showed you some targets earlier on, maybe this year we might only get to 70 or 80% of those targets. But the higher you can build up grass to the next 3 weeks, the longer the lactation you will have with more grass in the diet. I suppose that's what it's about. And I suppose the last 2 points are very important, that we can't, in the year that's in it, there's I suppose a danger out there that if we have low covers currently, that maybe the farm will be absolutely skinned before the end of the year, and we'll close at a very low grass cover, and that will have huge implications on costs for grass availability next spring. So just to put that point out there for people to think about it. I suppose, Tommy, you focus on closing cover on your farm there, you do?
Yeah, we like to close off at 700. Maybe sometimes realistically we finish off around 6, but definitely not any lower, because obviously we have a high number of we have a combat calving pattern in springtime, and obviously we need a bank of grass for those animals. So definitely 600 minimum. We can't drop down more.
Okay, so there's a few points there. So I suppose the last bit I'm going to talk about with Tommy here and yourselves tonight, ladies and gentlemen, is this is a sample budget from Pasture Base Ireland, which Tommy uses, and it's available on your own pasture base, or you want some guidance or help from your advisor. It's a very useful tool. So what I did here quite simply is that I looked at doing a simple budget for the Coskins and trying to get an idea of what feeding is ahead for this herd for the next 5 weeks to build up cover to our target of maybe 11, as this thing is shown here, maybe 1,200. So this is a simple tool that's on the menu on Pasture-Based Ireland. So there's the opening cover, 803. And Tommy measured last week an actual growth rate of 46. So when you're doing this budget, you set up the weeks, you put in the hectares, the stock will transfer from the stock table on the grass wedge. And I suppose the big unknown there, that's why I have a question mark here, is the growth rate. So I suppose I just have taken a guesstimate at growth rates over the next 5 weeks. They're the unknown. And simply what this thing is doing, it knows the growth, so it knows how much grass will grow. It knows the demand coming from the table on the left here. And this is a table that you can go in and change the figures. And then the day it'll predict that's what it is. It'll predict what the average farm cover is. So if we look at this table on the left here, what's it telling me and telling the Costigans, that if they continue their current feeding regime for the next 2 weeks up until the 12th of September, and then they go back to 15 kilos of grass and 3 kilos of meal right the way through, it's predicting that these growth rates come, which is again is the bit we don't know, but the typical growth rates for September are in the 50s. But we know in 2018 too, and we didn't get massive growth rates in September, even after the rainfall. So just to bear that in mind, and I suppose as everyone knows, the days are getting shorter as we move on. So this is a tool, you go in and you a bit of trial and error, and you play around with the figures here to get up the total intake, and you look what's happening, the actual farm cover. And I suppose the next trick then for Tommy is that when he measures grass every week or so, he can look at his budget, and if he's ahead of budget, it means he'll be able to pull out the size a bit quicker. And if he's falling behind, he'll have to just keep supplementing for maybe a week longer. So maybe, Tommy, your own thoughts on doing, I see there a number of budgets on Pasture-Based Ireland. What would you say to our audience tonight on using that budget tool?
Yeah, no, it is very good. Obviously, this year is going to be very hard to predict, obviously, as you said, growths. So you'll have to judge it on a per weekly basis. I suppose if the rain does come this weekend, we usually measure on a Monday, but we'll have to probably measure it again for, I say, Thursday, Friday, hoping with the heat in the ground, there would be some sort of bigger growth than normal, and probably act from there, I suppose, yeah.
So look, that's the tool that's available there on Pasture-Based Ireland. Contact your advisor for further help. I suppose with that then, I suppose really I'm just at this stage just to thank the Costigan family and Tommy there for joining us tonight. You're not going away, Tommy, you're not off the hook yet. And look, contact your local Teagasc advisor for individual advice, because we do know too that this drought is very much localized or regionalized, and some people have got the rain and other people haven't. So that's all I'm going to say with Tommy for now, and I'm going to hand you back there to Richie there.
Yeah, that's fine. I'll just get Tommy to hold there while Michael is getting set up there. Just the one comment, you made a comment about the mastitis there, and a question came through in the Q&A, Tommy. Was it higher cell count or was there actual mastitis? That's the question.
There was actually mastitis, high clinical mastitis.
Yeah, was there many cases just?
For the last 3 weeks, I would say maybe 8.
Okay. Okay. So, yeah, so it does. But
then obviously you just you strip the cows maybe once, twice a week, and then look at obviously your somatic cell count, bug dockets, etc., and then go from there. Really.
It's just part of, they're at a higher stocking rate in the field, and that's part of it.
This is it. That's what I think of this. Yeah.
Okay, Michael.
Okay, so what I'm going to talk to you here about is the use of fertilizer for the next few weeks, and linked with that then meal feeding, some points there on meal feeding over the next few weeks. So there's a slide there just showing the response to nitrogen, how it decreases there from August right through September and October. For tomorrow being the 1st of September, what you're going to see is you're going to see a fairly sharp drop off in the response that we get to nitrogen in September, and even more so in October. So that's the reason behind the fact that the application of chemical fertilizer is prohibited there from the middle of September onwards. So we only have about 2 weeks left. So the question is how much to apply and what response do we get? So typically the response that we get is of the order of about 20 to 1. Okay, so if we take the current price of protected urea, taking somewhere around about maybe 1,050 per ton, so we get a cost there of about 228 per kilo of nitrogen. We get a response rate of about 20 to 1 for the month of September. So what happens there is the cost of applying that nitrogen is about 228 per kilo of nitrogen, and that the grass that it grows then is worth about 240. So that's a sort of a break-even situation that we get in September, and that's, I suppose, that those calculations have changed considerably from last year and a couple of years ago because of the increase in costs. So the question is then, what are we, what's the how much nitrogen are we going to apply in the next few weeks? So typically what we're saying there is that if we go back and see what happened in August, so any fertilizer that was applied in August, the chances are the amount of rain we've got has been virtually no response. So in that situation, what we're saying is that a further application is not recommended. We're waiting for that nitrogen to the rain to work on that, and that will happen as when the rain comes. So this weekend, hopefully there's rain coming. And then what we're going to talk about then is how much do you apply in the next 2 weeks. So we're talking about max there of about 20 units per acre on ground that hasn't received nitrogen recently. So that's what we feel is a justified figure there, that the figure that's justified in terms of how much you're going to apply, given the cost and given the response that you're going to get. So two situations there. If it's got fertilizer in the last few weeks and that hasn't worked, well then stop. That's it. If it's got none recently and we get a bit of rain at the weekend, go out next week up to a rate of about 20 units. Now there's a few other factors there to bear in mind. Research is showing that there's a bit of a benefit maybe from applying potash with it. So a small rate of potash, you can get compounds there that would have maybe 15 or 20 units of potash with the nitrogen. There could be a benefit from doing that. Also be aware that there was a sort of free background nitrogen that's released at this time of the year, and it's going to happen with the soil temperatures that we have at the moment. Soil temperatures are above the normal that there would be at this time of the year. Once we get rain, the microbes in the ground will release this free nitrogen, and that's going to happen. So that's going to come to you at no cost. Now, just bear in mind at the bottom there, I've mentioned about environmental issues. What we saw happening in 2018, there was a lot of nitrogen knocking around in the ground, and when the pores in the soil fill up in October, November as rain comes, and the dikes start to fill up with water, a lot of nitrate ended up in water at that stage. And the sort of figures that are being used by agencies that are following water quality ended up with very high figures in 2018, and that's something that doesn't go down well with the general public. So we don't want to see a repeat of that situation this year. There's two reasons: there's the environmental reason and just the cost and the waste factor that happens if that occurs. So that's what we're saying there regarding nitrogen application. Now, after the middle of September, when we're talking you're not going to be applying any chemical nitrogen, you have a couple of options thereafter. The use of soil water or water parlor washings are very useful for growing grass for another while. So make use of those thereafter. You can continue to apply those. Now, watery slurry is also a very useful form of fertilizer. Now, bear in mind that this year, the closing date for the application of that this year is coming back from the 15th of September to the 8th of September. October, from the 15th of October to the 8th of October. So that can be used again up to that date to get some more fertilizer onto bare ground. So just bear that in mind when you're planning ahead on fertilizer. So hopefully there's a clear-cut message there on nitrogen application on your farms. So if we move on to the last bit then on meal feeding. Coming up there, Mark, is it? Yeah, okay. So just a few pointers there on that. Now, Pat has dealt already with what's happening there on the Costigan farm and then the use there of the information that's coming from pasture base and so on. So in general, we're talking about trying to hold a 25-30 day rotation on the grass, and so that's going to put some grass into the diet, but it's very little in lots of cases. The key thing is there that we want to get 18 kilos of dry matter into the cow. So we talk about the extreme situations, and I suppose most of you that you're on this evening are probably here because you are in that situation. So we're talking about feeding the 6 kilos of meal, 6 kilos of silage dry matter, and 6 kilos of grass. Now, in that, there's very, very few rations that are designed for feeding over and above 6 kilos. Probably just a point at the bottom there is to point out most of the merchants in the last couple of weeks there have introduced forage ration stretchers. They were available in 2018, and they're back on the scene now in the last week or two. So they're made up of ingredients such as palm kernels, soya hulls, corn gluten, designed to be used on top of the normal dairy rations that are there. So maybe in some extreme cases, some people might have to consider that to get in extra ration into cows and to cut down on silage usage. But in a situation where you're feeding more than 6 kilos of dry matter in silage in the diet, you may need to look at the idea that the protein in the overall diet is too low. So if we take people in derogation situation will be conscious that they're limited to a 15% protein ration, and so we're aiming for 15% or 16% in the overall diet. Silage will be typically 12 or 13% protein for goodage silage, and grass has been affected by the recent sort of scorching weather. It could be down around 13% as well. So overall, that might leave you with a low protein diet, and there is a room there for you to increase the protein percentage in the diet. So possibly we're talking about maybe a 16% ration just to lift the overall protein. You can do that when under derogation rules, and just take note that they apply up to the end of September. So if we're talking about fulfilling the derogation requirements, you can get a letter from your merchant that's providing the ration, or from ourselves, and that will get over the derogation situation. Just to be aware there that some people are conscious of sort of milk urea issues there at the moment in high milk ureas, and I suppose one of the key thing there to consider is, Pat has mentioned already there, and if you're buffer feeding animals, make sure that they all can get access to ration at the one time, and that's probably one of the key issues when we're in this situation that we're in the moment. You saw there what the Costigans are doing. I see other farmers where they're maybe in the nighttime. Just with a farmer yesterday where the nighttime that the cows are kept in a paddock there near the parlour, and they're fed silage, access to the yard, and fed silage overnight, feeding high levels of silage, and then they go back out to a normal grass feed during the day. So there's different combinations out there. Regarding, you need to be able to estimate how much silage the cows are consuming. So in the case of bale silage, the simple calculation is there that a bale contains somewhere of about 200 to 220 kilos of dry matter. So if we take 100 cow herd getting a bale of silage a day, that's 2 or slightly over 2 kilos of dry matter silage. You heard Tommy Costigan there explaining there how they work a diet feeder, and you can weigh and so on. But just to be able to put figures on what the diet of the cow is at the moment, and ensuring that these 18 kilos are getting into. So if every cow in the herd, especially, and thinking especially of younger animals, if they're all getting the 18 kilos of dry matter into them on a daily basis, well, then the thing should flow reasonably well. Now, just to bear in mind that bale silage is getting scarce. We saw the importance of doing an overall fodder budget, and Sandra has gone through that. I've mentioned about the fodder stretchers that are out there, and I suppose the key message at the end is just plan ahead where you're going to be for the next few weeks. You saw the value there of the fodder budgets that are there on the pasture-based system, how they can be used to plan ahead. Just a comment there, we've kind of got a message there from some of the merchants providing rations. For the last week or two, they've noticed a big increase in demand for rations. There's maybe a 2 or 3 day wait for deliveries, and just not to get caught out having empty bins and maybe over the weekend or something like that. So just the whole message that we're trying to get across this evening is the importance of planning ahead, seeing where you're at, where are you going for the next few weeks, and see, can we, apart from getting over the hump that's there at the moment, just kind of planning ahead and building up grass where possible, and thinking ahead towards next year. So that's it at my end, I think, Richie.
Yeah. Perfect. And just when Sandra's getting ready, Sandra, you might just get your presentation. I just have 2 questions for you. Have come up in the chat. There is milk urea. Question from Kilmana: if milk urea is high at 45, would you spread any more fertilizer?
Well, my understanding is there that if we take milk urea, there's probably sort of 2 things happening there. Cows that are grazing low covers tend to have high concentrations of nitrogen in the system, and much of that is due to the fact that the grass hasn't got its ability to sort of express itself and grow ahead and utilize the nitrogen. So that's probably happening. That's one of the reasons why you're going to get milk ureas there getting higher. The second thing is ensuring that all cows can eat at the same time, that the buffer feeding is being done properly, because if the energy going into the cow is there's a deficit there, it's not getting enough energy, and you're going to get this spike in milk urea as well. So that the management factors are there, and then the dietary factors. And I don't think there's too much concern excuse me, about the implications of urea. It's an indication of excess nitrogen in the diet. There would be a fear maybe among some farmers this could lead to embryo loss in breeding. The research would tell us that that's a risk probably in the first month of pregnancy. At this stage, most cows are probably 3 to 4 months in calf, so that risk won't be as big an issue there. So I think we're talking about two things. The question there is about spreading nitrogen. I think we're talking about spreading nitrogen. Just take what I said there. If it's been spread recently and hasn't been utilized by the plant, leave it be. If it hasn't been spread recently and we get the rain, go in next week with that low level, that 20 units, and just make sure that the diet overall is hitting the parameters that we want to get to make sure that the cow milks.
And just one more question for Sandra, is just following on fertilizer, is it better to spread watery slurry with the 20 units next week after the rain, or leave the watery slurry until October to get the boost of growth?
Yeah, I think my preference would be to use the chemical nitrogen up to the limit that we have, and you have the access then to the soil water and the watery slurry from there on. And as paddocks are grazed out, and from that middle of September onwards, they can be spread with the soil water or the watery slurry up to the 8th of October. That would be my preference.
Okay, thanks for that, Michael. And again, any more questions on the Q&A? Just keep your questions coming through on the Q&A. Sandra, we'll go to you on measuring the fodder for next winter.
Okay, thank you very much, Richard. You can hear me okay there?
Perfect, yeah.
Okay, so as Richard said, my name is Sandra Hayes. I'm based in Teagasc, Kilkenny, and what I'm going to go through this evening, which is managing the drought, kind of working on fodder budget and reassessment. Moving now. So the first thing that we need to do is assess the fodder stocks that we've already got in the yard. So the first thing is to get out there and calculate the number of bales of silage that are left. Second thing then is to measure the silage pits. So the easiest way to get that done is to measure the pit in meters. And typically silage is measured in tons of fresh weight before we actually convert it to dry matter. So you can see, like with the picture there I have on the right hand side, you need to measure the length of the pit that you've got, the width of the pit and the height of the pit. Now, sometimes with pits, it's going to be able to use the reference height walls, to where the silage is gone. In other cases, you're going to have it very high at the back. It could be 12 foot, and at the front, it could be 8 foot. If in doubt, take a measurement of the number of lengths that it's at the high amount of the 12 foot, convert back into meters, and then measure the low bit at the front. Or get your advisor out there, well used to doing this sort of job, and they have the measuring tape and all this and the information with them to do up the budget, to get the most accurate estimate of what silage that you have at the moment. Then when we get that, we can, as I say, multiply the length by breadth by height, and that'll give us the volumes in meters cubed. And we divide that figure by 1.35. It's a standard figure that we use, and that will give us the tons in equivalent at roughly 22% dry matter. And that'll give you the volume in dry matter that you have presently in your pits. So the other thing then would be to take in other fodder stocks like feeding straw and hay that you have in your yard. And one thing, with a lot of pits being opened at the moment, we would encourage the farmer to take to test the silage to see what kind of values of dry matter and dry matter digestibility and protein in it. And one of the easiest way to do, especially like the picture on the right hand side there, to take a sample like grabs in a W shape, like what you take with your soil sample of the silage, and that actually tests the silage that the cows are actually eating at the moment to let you know what is in their diet. So very, very important that you spend about 70-80 euros to find out that result. I think it's a key bit of information that you need going forward. So what I have then, you want to work out what kind of how far is this fodder stock that you have going to stretch. Now in front of me here, I have one of the very simple programs that you can fill in by hand. So on the left hand side there, you've got all your different categories of stock. Then you've column A, so you're writing down if you have 100 cows, 120 cows, or whatever number you have. The same with your 0 to 1s and your 1 to 2 year olds, and any bulls, etc., or older cows that you have on the farm. The next column, number B, you're putting in the number of months. So in a lot of cases, when I did this budgeting, way back in after first cut silage was done, we would have factored in a reserve of a month in here. So some farmers put 4 months, they were 3 and 1, other put in 5, which is 4 and 1 months. And then the column C is already pre-filled in for your column C. It gives you the tonnage and the pit silage needed per animal per month in that column. So you simply multiply A by B by C to give you the total number of silage needed for your herd for the winter time. Now, if you've only got bales on your farm, you get that tons figure and multiply by 1.25, and that'll give you the number of tons. So that's a very simple and straightforward budget that you can do, so you can see what you have and what you're going to need. Now, what I'm going to show you in the next couple of slides will look a little bit complicated, but what I've used is our fodder budgeting exercise on the pasture base. Okay, so I will talk you through what you're going to see here. So up in the top section of this, the same as the previous budget, you've got your number of cows, all the different stock that you're going to feed for the winter. You also have put in how long you're going to feed those animals. It's there in days. Then you've got the amount of meal feeding that you're possibly going to feed those cows. In here, I've milking cows and dry cows all divided up, and none of the dry stock. This is an actual budget that I have worked off that was done up in the middle of the summertime. So the meal feeding was put in as well. So I can see there with the first red arrow, the total tons of forage dry matter required on this farm. It's over 340 tons of dry matter. And I also, on the right hand side, I can see the total number of tons of meal, which is at 41. My second section there has my 2 pits in this particular case. I've got the length, the width by the height, and that, when it's worked out, gives me the total amount of dry matter, forage dry matter available on the farm. Okay. Third section down puts in the number of bales. It also takes into account hay and straw, which we didn't have in this case. We had 100 round bales of silage was made. And then the second section is optional for some people. They put in the amount of grass that's available both in the autumn and the spring that's available to the herd. So on the last circle there on that, I can see a surplus 149, which means 49% surplus. So when we did this budget in the summertime, this herd, with the amount of stock that they were going to feed, had a 49% surplus. So what I've done is I've reevaluated, went out and remeasured the pits on this herd, and we've redone the budget, right? So on the top again, we still have the same cows and dry stock that are going to be fed for the winter, the same amount of meal. So we still have our total tons of forage dry matter at 342 tons. However, the second round ring you'll see there is one of the pits was 28 meters long. It's now 10. 2/3 of that pit has been eaten. They've been surplus supplementary feeding since June, and 2/3 of that pit is gone. So I put in the new figures of the pit, and the third circle down is the number of bales. All the bales, the 100 bales, they've been fed to the stock as well. And the last column there, the grazing, I've reevaluated the average covers as well, what this farm will close at, and taking into account what, like what Pat did earlier in the budget for the autumn, I've reevaluated the covers and for the spring as well. So it's the same stock numbers, no bales and 2/3 of a pit gone, lower closing and opening covers. And that has given me a 27.5 deficit that needs to be filled by this farm. So I'm going to move on now and see how we're going to fill that deficit. Okay. So once again, same number of cows at the top, same length of feeding that's going to be given. But here I have brought up the meal feeding. So in a lot of cases, it's gone from doubled for the cows and the dry cows, and it is increased up to 2 kgs for all other stock on the farm. So it has just decreased the amount of tons of dry matter or silage I need, but it has doubled the amount of meal feeding from 41 tons to nearly 84 tons. So we've doubled the meal feeding. My pit is the same. I have my 2 pits, the full one and the one with only a third left. I've no bales put in, and I've still left my my grazing amount of grass. And that has just cleared the deficit. So an extra 40 odd ton of meal is needed to allow this budget back up the way it was. So that's a significant investment that this farmer will need to do if that's the avenue that they're going to take to sort out the deficit. Okay, so the next one I'm going to flick to is doing something slightly different. We've left the meal feeding what it was originally. We still have the same amount of stock. We still have the same fodder requirement needed. The pits are in again. As I say, 2/3 of one pit is gone. And this time what I've put in is there was a purchase of 150 round bales of silage, okay, put into this budget. And in this case, it has brought the budget back up to 102.5% required. So they're just quids in by buying those 150 round bales. So as you can see, I have two different scenarios that we've played around with here. One is increasing the meal feeding. Secondly, leaving the meal feeding as it is and bringing in 150 round bales. So it's very important. This is a great exercise to do with your advisor. A lot of people, even though they mightn't measure on pasture base, they're registered, so they have this access to them. So we would urge them to contact their local Teagasc office, their local advisor, and go through, gather the information, have the measurements of the pits, have the number of bales, whatever's on the farm for feeding for the wintertime, and reevaluate this budget. And then, as you can see what I've done here on screen, we've changed around a few figures, what's going to be needed, so that we can plan accordingly. So that's where I come in my final screen, Richard, is to sum up, to measure the silage pitch, count the bales, see what is available on the farm. Number two, test your silage. Definitely an invaluable resource to have on, particularly where you heard both Pat and Michael and our previous speakers talking about balancing the diet. You don't know how to balance until you know what's actually there. Do up a fodder budget, as I've gone through there, whether you do it the old-fashioned way on the hard copy with the paper and the pen, or you get down to a bit more detail in doing it up on pasture base. And other things that can bring in is scanning the herd, see what's in calf. This could be the year where you just don't need any surplus stock. So book in that milk recording, sell off the surplus ones, the low yielders, the ones with the high cell counts, the one with the persistent problem cases. And overall, with all this data, put a plan in place for winter 2022 and spring 2023. So thanks very much, Richard.
Okay, thanks everybody. And there's loads of questions coming through. So ask all speakers to put on their cameras and microphones, please. Okay, and Owen, maybe I'll go to you first, Owen, for a few questions. You're going through the questions there with me, maybe.
Yes, okay, Richie. Yeah, there's a good few questions coming in. I suppose one or two comments are coming through that they're envious of the amount of grass that Tommy seems to have on farm at the minute. There's plenty of fellas complaining that their average farm cover is less than 500, and they're heading towards an all silage diet. So I'm kind of pooling a lot of these questions together, just so I'm not repeating myself. The question is, how much, or what's the maximum level of meal feeding in the parlour? And after that, when do I start introducing a third feed? You know, if I go above a certain level of feed in the parlour, when do I start? Maybe for, I don't know, is it for Michael or Pat there? You know, when do I, how far can I push the meal in the parlour first? And then at what levels do I start introducing a third feed during the day?
I just come in there. Can you hear me there? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. No, well, I suppose most rations are designed to feed up to kind of 5-6 kilos, and you want to see what the spec is on them. Now, again, just talking to someone in the industry today, they were saying that one of the concerns from the milk processors will be sort of iodine levels as meal feeding levels go up. And I think what one of the changes that they've made is that they've brought down the mineral levels in their rations to allow for this situation, because there's high meal feeding levels going on all over. So again, just need to be conscious of wherever you're getting the meal as to what's happening there. But certainly one of the people I spoke to today said that they've made that conscious decision to reduce mineral levels to avoid that. After that, then you're talking about using the fodder stretcher rations, which I said are made up of ingredients like that. They'll come, you know, palm kernel, soya hulls, corn gluten. That kind of a ration is going to come in about €50 a ton cheaper than what you're feeding in the parlour, and it's designed for a sort of a third feed. So that should be happening in the sort of middle of the day. So you need to be kind of geared up for that to be able to do buffer feeding and be able to do that kind of feeding situation. So that's what's happened there, but that's at the extreme. But it did happen in 2018, and certainly the merchants are saying that it's starting to happen at the moment as well.
Okay, thanks, Michael. There's a question here for Tommy. If his average farm cover doesn't, we say, increase as he'd like to see it hitting the 1,000-1,100 mark, has he any plans for his empty cows? Are they a temptation to milk them on with the good milk price, or has he any plans to, what's his plans to do with them in particular?
Obviously, it depends on the situation. probably would make sense to get rid of the empty cows because obviously they're passengers. And obviously my stock rate would go down and then I would have enough grass. So that would be probably the most logical choice. Yeah, this is a good milk price here, but you weigh up the pros and cons of having enough grass for cows and trying to extend it, try to keep the cows out on grass for as long as possible. So it's a balancing act, I suppose, here.
It probably emphasizes what Sandra has covered, that you need to do a budget as well, to know how much grass and how much fodder you have on farm, and you make that decision then when is the right time to move them.
Exactly.
Okay. Michael, there's a question here on fertilizer. It's heading towards 5 weeks now since I had my last application of fertilizer. Would I not be better off spreading 30 to 40 units now next week when the rain is after coming?
Yeah, but it goes back there to the response that we're going to get, what I put up there earlier on, the response that we're getting at the moment, and the cost of what we're putting out. That's why we're still talking about these low levels of nitrogen application, and bear in mind that what's going to be the natural release of nitrogen from the ground as well should be adequate to grow the grass that we're going. So we get rain, we get the release of organic or nitrogen from the ground, low application of chemical, and that's what we need. We don't need any more than that. So once we start using above that, we're into the response rates, and the costs just don't add up, and we have the environmental issues as well.
Okay, thanks, Michael. Do you envisage an extension to the closing date?
No, I think what
happened.
No, I think what we're being told is that there's no desire for that from the department. Again, I think the environmental reasons will control that, and from a general farming point of view, and the last thing we want to see is bad press associated with nitrate levels spiking in water courses as the year goes on. So I don't think we can expect any extension on that one.
Okay, thank you. There's a question here. Person has silage fertilized with over 2 months. The cover's around 1,000, fairly burnt up. It's on the coast here in Waterford. He feels that it'll be hard to manage that in terms of cutting it and trying to make silage out of it, or pick it up even off the ground. First of all, what's his best option to deal with that kind of scenario where you have, maybe outside blocks that have similar, covers that are very dry? Like, what's anyone like to comment on that question? Or Pat, or?
Yeah, I think my preference would be to salvage the grass that's there. Now, whether it's possible to zero graze, I think he said there maybe it's not. But look, at this stage, the nitrates should not be an issue. And look, the danger is next week, we've seen before that when the weather comes on grass like that, that's burnt, it won't go from brown maybe back to green. It could get very greasy, and it could be even worse in feeding quality. So I think if you have to move young stock there, can it be zero graze, or can it just cut as it is and salvage it? Because I think our experience in 2018 is that those type swards got very messy when rain came, and you'd like to maybe get back to a clean sward, and you will get a decent regrowth on it again because you're removing a low cover off it. And I suppose just another point when I'm thinking there about the meal feeding there, and people are saying to me about cows going back in yield. I actually had a look at the Costigan's milk graph there for 2018, and when the grass came back in the diet, the cows actually increased by 0.3 or 0.4 kilos of milk solids. So the profile of that milk supply looked like an M. So I'd ask anyone to go back in 2018, look at their crop performance report graph under ICBF Herd Plus, and they'll see that when grass came back to diet, cows actually went back up in yield. So maybe it's a fear at the moment that cows are on downward slope, but that's what actually happened in 2018.
Yeah, the other thing just to remark on that, Owen, for that farmer with the cover of 1,000, if he does get it grazed or taken off, it'd be really important if he could get watery slurry back to that ground, because if he thinks the grass is stressed out, it'd be very important to get P and K and a little bit of nitrogen back, because the P and the K will help repair the root of that grass plant and get it growing again very quickly.
Yes, that's kind of leading into the next question there, Sandra. Should P and K be put out with the nitrogen for the last round? Is it going to add anything to growth rates or build fertility? Should it be considered? as part of the fertilizer plan?
In my opinion, it would. I would like. I know people in derogation are all limited with their P allowances, but if there is any part of the P allowance actually left, you know, though part of that 20 units that Michael was talking about putting out, it could be in the form of 18,612 or 24,10. In that form, or if they have their watery slurry or slurry that they can dilute down, it'd be really important to get back out, because like there's no restriction on your potash, and that's important too. But a good balance of a fertilizer or a good balance in the slurry is really important to get out for, you know, for all those swards. You know, the plant has been definitely stressed with the drought over the last number of weeks, and it definitely needs a P and K. It's a bit like in the springtime when we often talk about paddocks that get poached. You see the whole plant recovering in you know, less than 10 days when you put out the watery slurry on it to repair the ground. So this is no different in this case with the drought.
Okay, thanks, Sandra. And there's another question here, just in relation, is kind of referring back to that silage sward there. Would you be not better off to graze it if you could graze it rather than cutting it? Would it be more cost effective to graze it rather than trying to cut silage if you have silage ground, we say, within walking distance?
I don't think look, absolutely, but I just thought maybe I read into there. I thought it was an outblock you mentioned there, but yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
To graze it before you cut it, because just it wouldn't add up at all, and that would reduce stock rate on the milking platform maybe, and allow the milking platform to expand a bit and get the cover up and bring down stock rate. So absolutely yes, if possible.
And push out your rotation length probably, obviously, as well, to give the other paddocks a chance to recover as well.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay. Yes, Richard, I think I have a lot of the questions, a lot more similar type questions coming through. I've trying to...
Buying bales, just one more question there, just cost of buying bales compared to meal, Sandra.
Okay, on figures that I've sourced, it's very hard to get figures on anyone pricing up. I know the cost of making the bale went up to just anything in around the €40 a bale this year. So probably farmers anything between 40, 50 euros. So they'd have to balance it up. It depends on the type of ration that they're going to buy, whether they're going to get a fodder stretch or whether they're going to go, like ration at the moment is 4.15, 4.25. So if we did a simple calculation, the 150 bales by €50 versus the 43 extra tons of ration, and put that at 4.25 as well. It's a very simple answer that the bales. Plus as well, you've got, in that particular example I gave you, you've got meal level in already and you're upping it. So it could be a case that there'll be extra work put in. You might have to put that feed out in 3 different feeds during the day. So that's extra labor and time for the farmer. So it's not only a simple calculation of just, do I buy bales? Do I buy meal? Have I got the time?
Method of feeding as well.
Yeah. Have I got, it was mentioned by Michael there, have I got the feed space as well?
Okay, and just one question of straw. I think, Michael, did you mention earlier that it was straw, the availability of straw?
Yeah, it seems to be like if we take straw at the moment, it's probably a company can be bought. I mean, it's worth its value relative. If we go back to 2018, straw was making about the same kind of money it's making this year, and it was very scarce and big demand for it. And like in the meantime, feed prices have gone up considerably, silage has gone up considerably. So in actual fact, straw is quite good value at the moment. It's worked up to about €22 for the ordinary round bale, compared to everything else at the moment. And you can buy straw cheaper than that at the moment. It can be got. So I think it's if you have room to store straw, you could do a lot worse than go out and buy it, and if in the worst case situation you just end up storing it until next year and it's fine. So I think it's one ingredient that people should be stocking up on if they have any doubt over and it's very over their amount of fodder, and it's very even in normal times people find it very useful, and they put in maybe something like 3 kilos of straw in the dry cow diet.
Okay, one quick question.
Particularly important as well, if you test your silage and you find out that it's 75 DMD and you want that for dry cow feed, you definitely need the straw to dilute the value of the silage. You couldn't be feeding 75 DMD to dry cows.
Okay, thanks. So, Tommy, quick question for you there. What's your fertilizer plan for the next 2 weeks? You have a nice cover of grass ahead of you, but what are you planning on doing for the next 2 weeks? Are you going to blanket spread or follow the cows, or what's your plan?
Well, we went out with a bit of watery slurry on grazed paddocks there late last week. The plan for the summer was just farm the cows with 20 units of straight urea. So we probably will continue that. We will probably let the weekend off and probably go out maybe Tuesday/Wednesday and spread again. We just wouldn't feel any benefit to spread information Friday before the meeting, because obviously just the ground is like concrete and the runoff, it just won't make sense.
So your aim is let the rain soak in first, and then spread your fertilizer midweek next week.
Exactly. Let the ground soak up what moisture is there, and then go. Yeah.
Okay.
And type of product, Tommy, what are you using?
Yeah, so we would have went out with obviously our P's and K's, our Protect P in April, and then we would just, during the summertime, we'd just go with the urea. And then the back end of the year, we go with a product from Grassland Fertilizer. It's solid K. It's a bit of K, but it's also a lot of side conditioner. And we went with that for the last 2 years, and we find it's very beneficial to us.
So it's all protected urea right through the...
Oh, protected urea right through the summer months, yeah.
Okay. Okay, Owen, is there any other questions we're missing there?
Just having a quick run. Quick question: If rain does arrive, how long should we keep supplementing for? Where should we start going back grazing, or what's the average farm cover we should aim to reach before we start cutting out supplementation, we say? Sandra?
I'd let pre-grazing covers at least get up to 1,000. Have something substantial there, and review it that at least for 7 days you've got that coming on. If growth rates do go up to 50 or 60 with that rain that you've factored in, that you've got them for at least 7 days into the cow's budget before taking out everything. And the silage can be pulled very quickly, but you could, on a gradual basis, then drop back the meal. Pat might answer from maybe an average farm cover that he'd like to see.
Yeah, but if I know one mentioned at the start, there's a lot of people there. I know Tommy's up at 800. There's a lot of people there with an average farm cover of 500, and they're stocked at 3 cows per hectare. If you take that scenario, Pat, are they likely to be feeding silage or meal right through for the autumn?
Yeah, well, look, I'd say not always stretch it at 3 cows a hectare and greater. Your demand for grass is so high, you're looking for extraordinarily high growth rates. I could say even in a normal year. I have a feeling, just talking to around the country, that people's stock rates have crept up again this year. Maybe good milk prices helped, and maybe it's come back to bite us a bit there. I see there was a question there too about culling a cow, but there's a figure there now. If you cull a cow now on the 1st of September, you can save 3.4 ton of dry matter up to the April of next year. And obviously, if, as Sandra has alluded to, if your sums don't look great on your fodder budget, you have no grass, I think you'll seriously consider looking at the herd profile following milk recording or the scanning, and make that decision, because the cost of replacing silage is going up and up and up, I'm afraid. But yeah, and again, I would come back on what Sandra's point there. I think I'd like to see the covers in front of the cows going up 1,000 plus, even 1,500 before I think about putting out silage. But again, if people want to come back and do a little mini budget with their advisor, we can do all that with you, or check against your budget that's there, as Tommy will do there, I suppose.
Okay, that's great. Thanks very much, everybody. We're at the hour mark, so thanks very much to all the speakers. A big thanks to Tommy. Thanks for coming on, and to Willie there from the Fenians in Johnstown. This webinar is recorded. We will send it out to all clients in the next week. It will be on YouTube, so we'll send out a link to all clients during the week. So again, thanks to everybody. It's all about being planned, measure, make a plan, look at the fertilizer, the economics of spreading fertilizer, and the environmental issues around the fertilizer. Okay, thanks everybody, and thanks everybody for attending, and thanks to all the speakers, and we'll talk again. And to Mark Trimble in the back. We also get Mark in the background, who controls all the technology there. So if anything goes wrong with technology, we always have Mark to blame. So thanks, Mark, again for hosting the event. Okay, thanks everybody.